This is a presentation of OneLogin Training.
Welcome to Getting Started with Identity Lifecycle Management for the third and final part. Now, remember, again, user provisioning doesn't actually kick in until a user is assigned to the app. So, again, how does that happen? Well, the user could be manually assigned to the app connector. We demoed that earlier. That's how we added Miss DDoS to the app and tested out with some other users. The user could also be added to what's called a OneLogin role. That role then can be associated with the app, and then thus, based upon the user assigned to the role is associated with the app, the user is now assigned to that app. And users can automatically be assigned to those OneLogin roles based upon, again, the fact that they match certain criteria. So remember we mentioned the mappings a while back. If user belongs to the sales department, assign them to the sales role kind of thing. And that sales role then associated with handy dandy sales apps like maybe Salesforce. So assigning the apps manually, go to the user account, click on the applications tab, then click the plus button in the upper right hand corner. From there, you'll just choose the app that you want to add them to. Roles, again, can be used for multiple purposes, but their main purpose is to associate users or assign users to particular applications. So multiple users can be assigned to the same role, and the role can actually be associated with multiple applications. Like we see, the all employees type of role here, where all of our employees are in it. So they're all assigned to that particular role, and the apps associated with it would be the ones that we're most commonly using, like G Suite, Slack, or Namely. So you can assign users to roles manually. Again, go to that user record, click on the applications tab, and just select the role on the left-hand side there. When you save it, you'll see there's a green check mark. That's what shows me that that role has been signed manually. However, even more better is to assign those roles automatically. So using those mappings. So here, department, if it contains the word marketing in it, then we want to assign users that match that criteria to the marketing role. So this will fire off anytime a new user is being created or a user is being updated in any way. It's always checking to see if the user matches the criteria, then it will apply that action. In this case, assigning them to the marketing role. Now that deprovisioning process doesn't kick in until the user's removed from the app or even perhaps disabled within OneLogin. So deprovisioning can kick off actually when several different types of events might occur. So user manually removed from the app connector, you added them to manually. Manually removed from the OneLogin role, you manually associated them with. Or maybe they're automatically removed from the role because either the criteria, right, those conditions within the mapping changed, or perhaps the user's attribute changed, like they switch from one department to the other. So they're no longer part of the marketing department, so they're no longer assigned to the marketing role. So that could remove them obviously from the role and deprovision them from the apps that they are in. You can also trigger, again, events such that the user gets maybe disabled, and that's kind of part of deprovisioning, by disabling the user within OneLogin or even deleting them from within OneLogin. So to manually remove the user from an app connector, if you manually added them, to kind of undo it the way that you did it, is go and select, again, the user record, select where you see that application, and you'll see a delete option. If you don't see the delete option, then the user was added via a role somehow. So if they were added via a role manually, like I manually added them to the role, I can then remove them from the role. Just click on the green check mark again and hit the remove button. If I want to, though, I can also, the user leaves the organization, I can disable or basically unlicense the user in OneLogin. And again, remember, I have some options as to how I want to handle that in the application. Do I want to disable them within the application, or do I want to maybe delete them within the application? Those are settings that were over on that provisioning tab that we looked at earlier. And last but not least, of course, I could delete them from OneLogin. Again, this will trigger an actual try to delete within the application, but I can tweak that. I could say maybe just disable them. So again, some options that you have. A delete doesn't necessarily mean a delete within the application, but how you want to handle like a disable, delete versus remove them from the application, those are, again, some of those extra settings that you can modify on the application's provisioning tab itself. All right, so to finish up, let's look at some best practices as well as some tips when it comes to troubleshooting. First off, best practices. Assign applications that have provisioning enabled to their own role. This can make it a lot easier to control who's in that role, thus who's assigned to the application, thus who's being provisioned and consuming licenses within that application. So makes it kind of a nice clean design and a little bit easier to troubleshoot and control when that provisioning is occurring. Also, make sure you clearly define what you want to have happen to a user when they're onboarded and when they're offboarded. So write it down somewhere. Have a list. There are some things that OneLogin can do and some things it might not be able to do. So you want to make sure that everything does get done consistently. So, for example, we can, in G Suite, we can make sure that a user is disabled, but, you'd have to go into G Suite and create rules to make sure that maybe their license is changed within G Suite, like they get a cheaper license once they're disabled. And you'd have to do something else, maybe even use our workflow product to go in and reassign users to different content. I need to now assign that mailbox to his manager since he's left the company. So make sure you know what steps need to be done and ideally automate all those steps. OneLogin can get you pretty far along the way, either through just our lifetime management feature here with provisioning and deprovisioning, or using in conjunction with something like our OneLogin workflows. Then for applications that you can't enable provisioning for, or maybe you can't automate some of those steps, create a notification. OneLogin has a built-in notification system, and so it can fire off when a user is, added to an app, or maybe they're added to a role, either manually or automatically, and thus now you know that they've been assigned to the app. And there are certain steps that need to be performed when that happens, and they need to be performed manually. So the notification can send off an email to you as, the account owner, or maybe all your super users, or whatever users need to be designated to go do this job. Now, when it comes to troubleshooting, and there's some sort of error along the provisioning line, you're going to find those errors in multiple places. They actually show up multiple areas within the UI, so they're hard to miss. You can see them in the event viewer over on the left-hand side, activity menu, go to events. We can see where domain could not be provisioned into Salesforce there. I could also see it on that provisioning page underneath the users menu. I can see failed provisioning domain in Salesforce there. I could see it on the user's record, on their application tab. I can see it over on the application, on the users tab. So lots of places I might see the error. Anywhere where I click on it, I'm going to be able to see the details. In this case, again, yelling at me about that license limit. So maybe actually pay for some licenses, get a new trial account. So there are some common provisioning errors you might want to be aware of. So for example, again, user, if they're not showing up the app, or their changes aren't showing up the app, what's that problem most likely? The approval process, right? Is it waiting for an approval? So maybe go find that particular event on the provisioning tab or on the app itself, click the pending and approve it. Another kind of common errors that you might see is like unable to authenticate API, or maybe it'll pop up with like internal provisioning error. So this is, an actual error, kind of like that limited license error there. So you might actually see wording like unable to authenticate API or internal provisioning error. And in those cases, really easiest thing to do is regenerate the OAuth token. So go to the configuration tab, underneath OAuth, click clear token, save. Then you'll see it says authorize, click on authorize, go through the steps to authorize again. Make sure that you are logged in with administrative credentials to that application when you are enabling OAuth, because you need to have those permissions in order to grant OneLogin the OAuth permissions. So that could also be one of the errors that might initially be occurring there. Another error that you might see is user cannot be found, and this is part of like a deprovisioning process. And really, usually this is because you did not respect the flow. The flow is users need to be created, updated, deleted, disabled, whatever, within OneLogin, not within the applications. The sync only goes one way. So if you did delete the user within the application, deprovisioning can't occur because it doesn't see the user to now delete it or disable it. So it gets kind of stuck. So there is an option. You can go to the user's record in that application. So go to the application, user tab, click on the user record. And if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see disassociate login. So it'll kind of like break the connection between the user and what it's looking for within the application. And then you can go and manually delete the user. So again, pay attention to the flow. One of the biggest problems, and this is what I'm going to end on, is once provisioning is set up, understand changes need to be made on the OneLogin end. Let them flow through to the application. The sync is only in one direction. Don't go messing with them over in the application. If you've got administrators who want to administrate those accounts over in the application and they want to take over all that, then don't enable provisioning. Okay? There is a single source of truth in this provisioning game, and that is from OneLogin to the application. OneLogin is the source of truth. So pay attention to the flow. And this concludes the last part of getting started with Identity Lifecycle Management.
This is a presentation of OneLogin Training.